Hey, what's up, everybody? So, I wanted to talk a bit about the coronavirus issues, especially as relates to the economy and what a lot of people miss. Because I see so often people are trying to make assertions about how dangerous the virus is and how important it is to shut things down and get people inside and have social distancing. But I really want to emphasize just how problematic that is without thinking through all of the costs and consequences of having a unified policy of all people, social distancing and staying home and things like that. So first and foremost, the people who virtue signal the loudest about this issue really probably have no grounding to stand on in the first place, right? When it comes to their past actions, I guarantee you most everybody didn't quarantine when they had the flu, strep throat, a cold, a cough, whatever it is in the past. And you can sit there and say, well, the flu is not the same as coronavirus, more, potentially deadly, or maybe it spreads a little faster. Yeah, well, that's crap, because the fact of the matter is that people die in the hundreds of thousands based on complications from the flu, from pneumonia, from other viruses and illnesses every year. And of course, those who are most likely to die are usually elderly, their immune systems are weak, or people have pre-existing conditions, like if you have asthma or cancer or leukemia or something like that. You're going to have a greater risk of having complications and dying. But the fact is that nobody in those past instances with serious numbers of people dying would themselves say, oh, I'm so scared and freaked out, I got to quarantine myself. Nobody does. It takes 8 days to 2 weeks usually for cold and flu, virus symptoms, things like that, to actually dissipate and no longer be contagious. You can literally just go look this up. CDC, National Institutes for Health is all public knowledge in terms of the period during which you could potentially be contagious or share to others for those common things that people have pretty much every year. Like a lot of people will get some type of cold or flu, and again, those things can and do lead to other people dying in terms of it getting shared, and then of course someone who has some underlying condition or is elderly dies. It literally happens in America all the time. So these people who are now freaking out about coronavirus literally have for most all their life, never acted in accordance with this newfound value, this newfound virtue signal. It's total BS. We got to save that virtue signaling here, because it really has no bearing on the reality of body counts in terms of ways people die in the United States. So when you take a look at that, at how someone's suddenly reacting, we can peel away some of this hyperbole and hype and start to think about the nature of the virus itself, the nature of government action, and the consequences of intervention. So in the United States, you have the FDA and the CDC having limitations on people being able to come up with solutions. And these regulatory red tape periods were very significant, especially at the onset of the virus's discovery. In fact, there was a Chinese doctor who was in Seattle who discovered by testing kits that there were people who had coronavirus. And the government shut her down from doing that. They said, no, you can't do that. And she, went and tested anyway in defiance, and they're like, ooh, and then they let her do it for a little bit and then stopped again, and then eventually later on. But the thing is that this shows, clearly and unequivocally that the regulations were a huge hurdle to discovering who was, infected and passing it on. And these kind of regulations are not limited to the actual testing kits. The regulations on the building of hospitals, many states have a policy where you have to have a certificate of need, that in order to build a hospital, and this comes from a cronyism past of other hospitals not wanting to have competition, but if you don't show a need in the area, you can't just build a hospital. Whereas in places like South Korea, where they're able to resolve this issue without having to do crazy lockdowns of the entire economy. They don't have those certificates of need. They don't have all the hurdles you need for getting the testing kits out, and they were able to find out who was actually infected right away, target those people, the people who actually were sick and their contacts, get them to quarantine and let everybody else be otherwise uninterrupted. So, when you start to actually break down the facts and figures, you start to see a picture emerge that the coronavirus, in terms of the actual symptoms, in terms of the death rate and things like that, really isn't that crazy. Again, even if you just say, oh, it's not as bad as the flu, okay, take the flu and take one other common illness that people die from, and now suddenly you're more than corona, but that still exists, and you didn't freak out. You didn't think the hospitals were being overwhelmed during the peak of flu season, and then something else happens, whatever it was. If there's a special kind of thing, Ebola, H1N1, whatever. It just is absolutely mind-numbingly unbelievable how ignorant people are in the comparative. And of course, that's planned. Those in the state and the media want you to believe that at the second that they say, oh, there's an emergency, you should just stop your life and let the government essentially plan your lives, and that if you don't follow every single order, you're somehow a bad person. And this type of psychology is what ultimately, as we're already seeing, will lead to a very rapid decay of the economy, because if the government says, hey, people, you can't work, you're not allowed to go out and travel, congregate groups and things like that, they shut down supply chains, you are going to rapidly see a de-evolution of markets. And you can't sit there and say, oh, well, just certain essential businesses, because those essential businesses are also funded by people who get their money from these quote-unquote non-essential businesses. And many of these non-essential businesses provide products that help those other businesses run in the first place, right? They're suppliers for various elements of their supply chain for these essential businesses, whatever they're providing, medical, or otherwise, transportation. So it really takes a profound level of economic ignorance to sit there and say, oh yeah, just, immediately shut down everything and everybody just stay home and that's it. I mean, you have to recognize that there are costs and consequences that will both lead to people dying because of lack of supplies, again, on a global scale, and it will also lead to people losing their jobs, not being able to make rent, evictions, possibly then, of course, not that I think this is a great thing, at all. It's the sad truth that there's going to be people who are so desperate they commit suicide, right? They feel like they lost everything through the stock market. They lost everything through their jobs and things like that. They're on their last legs. And, the evidence of that's already come through. And then you have the government, in addition to, causing this problem of watching the economy completely crash, you have the government trying to have solutions by trying to give people money, which to some extent could just be like a tax return, but really they're pulling in a bunch of pork to pass all this other type of cronyism. And then you have the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates, printing money, saying they're going to, print indefinitely and then buy up bad loans from banks. You have a perfect storm of the worst kind of central planning you can imagine. This is this is something that's like Venezuela level bad. So when you look at those facts and you start to really think through how many people's lives are going to be affected, especially in the global sense, right? How that economy translates to people in the second and third world and their resources and their ability to survive, especially as the world, as a whole was starting to move out of poverty. This is something you can't just ignore and just be like, oh, well, I'm an American, I can kind of make it, but, whatever, to people around the world who depend on the, the global trade. So to me, it's absolutely maddening. And, at its root is government, with the Chinese government and the CCP covering up the nature of the virus in the first place, right? They were downplaying it in 2019, saying, oh, we don't think it can transmit airborne, this or that. They're trying to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal, when it was. Now, again, I don't think it's a big deal in terms of, oh, everybody's going to die, zombie apocalypse. But, of course, with any type of illness or disease, it's important that people have as much knowledge as possible. You want to know as much as you can so that people in the market can develop solutions, right? I mean, this is something that's very basic. You want people to understand the situation so people can react accordingly. Well, by their covering it up, there was people already traveling around China and outside China to the U.S., spreading this in 2019. So what's going to happen, of course, is that there's this whole hoopla about everything that's going on and ooh, we got to stop it. But yeah, guess what? It's already been spread. This is ridiculous. The virus has already been widely spread. It has been spread even more so because of FDA and CDC regulations that restricted testing and people making supplies to be able to try to help people early on. And that's been going on for so long at this point that it's kind of a silly thing to even think you're going to stop it meaningfully because there's just already been so much exposure. So, at this point, though, given that we know it's already been around for so long, I take solace in the fact that it appears to be, at least in that trend, that there's more people who had it and didn't know it, and so there's a lot more mild cases or just asymptomatic than is being immediately led on, at least, from the media perspective, because what do those in the media do? They want to make things extra scary, get people into the fear buying so that, they want to read and stay in touch. So they make headlines like, oh, 21-year-old dies, but they leave out until the fourth paragraph, oh, he had leukemia, by the way. So, and you have things like in Italy where lots of old people die, which, makes total sense that they have an elderly population and a very physical population, right? They're approximately close. The culture there's lots of hugging, kissing. It's going to happen, right? Very family-oriented. If it spreads to one family member, it's going to make it around really fast. But you have a little bit of a kind of miscommunication there where if the doctors are labeling someone's death as, oh, this was COVID-19, but really it was, they had some other complication, they were elderly, something like that, and they were dying from something else more so, really than truly the virus is, the thing that really killed them. It's kind of just like, oh, okay, they were on their way out, and they're labeling it that, so it inflates the numbers, right? If someone already is like dying of cancer, or they're basically on their last legs, almost in hospice, and then, oh, okay, now you got, COVID-19, oh, and now they died. I mean, you know what I mean? It really inflates it. So I think that's what we're going to see, for anyone who's like reading deep into this, is I think we're going to see that while, it's a concern, definitely, I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be sick for other things that are less than this. I'm already someone who's like, okay, wipe everything, wash my hands and stuff. I'm already like not wanting to be sick by anything else. So to me, now this is just normal. I'm like, great, everybody's at least more conscientious of how they wash their hands and stuff. So that makes me happy. But the idea that everybody should live in fear is absolutely wrong, and that all the economy should just be shut down is absolutely wrong-headed. And that will have much greater effects in the long term in terms of poverty, starvation, people dying, than a virus where many of the people who are dying, again, it's tragic and it's sad, but old people, they die. It's expected. And if it wasn't coronavirus, it would have been the first, flu, pneumonia, whatever else they got, because again, that's what happens once you get up in age in your 70s, 80s, and so forth. It's expected that little things can cause your death. A little fall, heart attack, things like that. It's much easier to die. So again, it's tragic, but this is something that really is best suited to people in the market taking care of. And I think if you look at the evidence so far, where the government's already been like putting back restrictions, regulations in response because they had to, because people who were wanting to make test kits couldn't under the regulations, it would take too long, you're going to start to see it pop up. And you have things like even the Carnival Cruise Lines offering their ships to people to, use them as, temporary hospitals. You have people using 3D printers to come up with cheaper devices, for respirators and things like that. You have an example, again, the Chinese government built hospitals in 10 days. Now, I'm not a fan, of course, of state building hospitals, but the point to take away from that is that an entity which didn't have to go through bureaucratic paperwork, the Chinese government, they didn't have to ask anybody, was able to build hospitals like that. Guess what happens when people can use prefabrication and things like that in order to build temporary facilities or get things up going without having to do all this crazy red tape and all this certificate of need stuff? Guess what? There's going to be solutions. So to me, it's very concerning that so many people are saying that the government should start centrally planning everything. Meanwhile, what they're really doing is they're cutting off all the people providing value to each other that would allow the resources to actually tackle this problem meaningfully, from making more masks to making test kits to providing more solutions in hospitals, providing treatment and medication. You can't solve the problem if you've cut off everybody in the market from being able to share information, ideas, trade, benefit each other, and use those resources to tackle a problem. So, it's just really frustrating me. So I just had to make a video on this to talk to y'all about it. Just that, you had a kind of like inside scoop here. And again, if this trend continues, if the government continues to intervene, if the Federal Reserve continues to do this policy of, printing money and all this other stuff, and they do bailouts, with the, corporations, things like that, I mean, you're going to see much greater, much longer effects than what we're seeing right now. It will be devastating, absolutely devastating for people's money. We're talking about serious inflation. We're talking about a very strong weakening, a big weakening of the dollar. We're talking about the overall, stock market still slumping majorly. People losing their 401ks, their savings, their retirement. So, people are going to be struggling. And I believe that many people who thought they were going to be retiring in the next few years are going to, find themselves at a very tough end, with things that are going on. So just pay attention, resist all of the, kind of cronyism that's being thrown out, resist the, calls like you better stay in your home or you'll be arrested, resist the curfews, resist all this nonsense. The ethical solution is elderly people, obviously self-quarantine. Many of them are retired anyway. If you already have a pre-existing condition, you're kind of at risk, okay, so, self-quarantine. Like, you don't need to ask people to do that, right? Like most everybody else, if you're otherwise healthy and you're otherwise able to take care of yourself, again, they can keep working. If they get sick, get out of there. And again, people say, well, you could have, the virus on you and be asymptomatic for weeks, potentially. It's like, yeah, and guess what? So does many other people going to have the virus and be asymptomatic or have mild cases and things like that. People are going to get sick. Wow. They're going to have colds. They're going to have flus. They're going to have this type of stuff. Are most of them going to die? No. They might get sick. Maybe it's for a day. Maybe it's for a couple of days. If they do, then you got to just deal with it. And that's how it goes with everything else. People responding to the market to those demands as people get sick and people get better, coming in and out of work. That is the way to solve the problem, not by making everybody completely incapacitated and unable to provide value. So, all right. I'll talk to y'all later, and I hope this clarifies some things on the situation.